You think saving money is always a good thing, but for some people, it's already the problem, and they don't even realize it yet. Not debt, not overspending, saving. The very behavior that felt responsible, that got praised, that separated you from the financial chaos you watched other people live through, that behavior is what's quietly holding your life in place. And here's what makes it so hard to catch. You're not saving for the future anymore. You're saving to feel okay right now. If that landed somewhere specific, not vague, not general, but specific, this video is probably about you. Let's be clear about who we're actually talking about. Not someone reckless. Not someone who avoids hard conversations or refuses to look at reality. We're talking about someone who built something real through discipline, consistency, and a level of financial seriousness that most people around them never developed. You probably grew up watching money cause tension. Not necessarily poverty, but unpredictability. That particular silence that settles over a household when something unexpected costs more than it should. You absorbed it. You decided you wouldn't live that way, and you didn't. That took real commitment over real years, and from the outside, what you've built looks like exactly what financial responsibility is supposed to look like. It is, mostly. But something else has been running underneath it. Something your intelligence has made harder to see, not because you aren't sharp enough to notice, but because you're sharp enough to justify it. That's the part worth examining. Here's what no one tells you about the psychology of saving. It feels good, and the feeling has almost nothing to do with wealth. The act itself, the restraint, the accumulation, watching the number climb, produces a real psychological reward, a sensation of control in a world where control is mostly an illusion. And that sensation is powerful enough that for some people, it quietly detaches from its original purpose. This is where it turns. Saving stops being about the future. It becomes about managing how you feel right now. And most people never notice when that shift happens. They keep calling it planning. They keep calling it discipline. And the uncomfortable part, they're probably right that it looks like both. But underneath the planning, underneath the discipline, something else is running the decisions. Something that has nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with anxiety that never found another way out. Someone driven by anxiety to accumulate money and someone driven by genuine strategy make almost identical decisions every day. Same purchases avoided, same milestones hit, same apps checked, but they produce radically different lives. Because genuine strategy eventually says, now I use this. It has a destination, a moment where the whole structure gets deployed towards something. The anxiety-driven version never gets there. The number that was going to feel like enough becomes the new floor. The release never comes because the saving was never really about the money. It was what the money was temporarily doing to the feeling underneath. You didn't build financial freedom. You built a system that keeps you from using it. And the smarter you are, the more convincing the story you construct around why that isn't true. The intellect doesn't push back on this pattern. It justifies it, cleanly, on demand, without hesitation. That's not discipline. That's the trap. To understand how this happens, you need to understand one thing about anxiety, specifically how it interacts with behavior that produces short-term relief. Anxiety is a response to uncertainty. The nervous system is profoundly uncomfortable with the unknown, and it scans constantly for ways to reduce that discomfort. When it finds a behavior that quiets the unease, even temporarily, it remembers. And it starts reaching for that behavior automatically, almost reflexively, every time the discomfort returns. Bring money into this. Money connects to almost everything that matters: where you live, how you care for people who depend on you, what choices you'll have access to, what your future actually looks like. The stakes are genuinely high. Anxiety around money isn't irrational. For most people, it makes complete sense. But here is where the loop closes. At some point, maybe in a stressful period, maybe years ago, you discovered that saving more made the anxiety go quiet. Adding to the account, not spending, watching the cushion grow, it produced a sensation of control. And control, even just the feeling of control, is one of the most effective anxiety-reducing experiences available to the human mind. The brain logged it, that worked, and it started reaching for it again. This is the loop. Uncertainty triggers anxiety. Anxiety creates an impulse toward control. Saving feels like control. The anxiety quiets, temporarily. The uncertainty doesn't change. The anxiety returns. The brain knows exactly what to reach for. And it doesn't feel like a pattern. It feels like you. That's what makes this so hard to see. It doesn't arrive from the outside wearing a label. It arrives from the inside wearing your reasoning, your voice, your perfectly sensible explanations. It feels like careful thinking. It feels like being responsible. It feels most of all like a choice, when by that point it largely isn't one. And once that loop locks in, you don't feel like you're choosing anymore. It runs underneath the decisions, underneath the spreadsheets and the reasonable rationales and the very coherent explanations for why the timing still isn't quite right. The loop doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps running. The threshold of what feels safe rises. No amount ever fully resolves the anxiety it was recruited to resolve. What once felt like enough becomes the new floor. The number you imagined would bring peace gets reached, and instead of peace, there's quiet recalibration. Maybe a little more, maybe one more year. The money is growing, but your life is staying the same. That's the mechanism, not a character flaw, not a failure of intelligence, a loop. One that intelligent people are particularly good at maintaining without ever recognizing it for what it is. On this channel, we examine the psychological patterns underneath financial behavior, the ones that stay invisible precisely because they mimic virtue. If that kind of thinking interests you, you may want to subscribe. This pattern doesn't reveal itself in dramatic moments. It lives in ordinary ones. It shows up when someone who earns well, objectively, genuinely well, feels a flicker of discomfort when the dinner bill arrives, not because any goal is in danger, not because the money isn't there, but because spending produces a faint wrongness they've never examined. They pay, they enjoy the evening, but the unease was there, and the unease is what matters, not the amount, but the feeling the amount produced. It shows up in the home that was supposed to be temporary, the neighborhood that was fine for now, back when now was several years ago. The reasons to stay always made sense. The market, the timing, uncertainty about what comes next. None of those reasons were wrong, but they never stopped. And life kept happening in the provisional version, while the version that matched who they'd actually become stayed perpetually scheduled for later. This is the part people don't admit. Nothing is actually wrong, but nothing is really moving either. The accounts are fine, the job is fine, the life is by all reasonable measures fine. But there's a version of your life that exists just past the next threshold, the one that keeps moving, and you've been almost there for longer than you want to count. If this is you, you already know it. You felt it. You just haven't said it out loud. Think about whether you have one of those deferred things. Not the vague sense of eventually, the specific one. The version of your future life you named at some point as the reason for all of this. Now ask yourself honestly, has the threshold moved since you named it? If it has, if what enough means has shifted while the goal stayed in place, that's not a small observation. That's the whole thing. The cost of this pattern is not financial. The accounts look healthy. Net worth is growing. By every standard metric, things are fine, better than fine. The cost doesn't appear there. It shows up in time. Specifically, in time that passed while conditions were being waited for. Years lived in a holding pattern, not unhappy, not desperate, but provisional, as if real life were scheduled to begin once a particular number was reached or a particular uncertainty finally resolved. Those years don't return. The arithmetic of time is less forgiving than the arithmetic of money. A financial miscalculation can often be corrected. A decade spent preparing to live cannot be recovered. It becomes part of the record, not of what was chosen, but of what was waiting while everything appeared responsible from the outside. The cost shows up in relationships. A partner who wanted to travel and mostly didn't. Children raised in a home where spending carried invisible weight, where generosity felt slightly complicated. Friends whose invitations were declined enough times that they quietly stopped coming. Small things individually, defining things accumulated over years. And then there's the cost that arrives last and hits hardest. Sometime in the mid-40s or early 50s, when the numbers are objectively sufficient, when there is no longer any honest external reason to wait, the person looks at what they've built and finds it doesn't feel the way they expected. The ease they were accumulating toward isn't there. The persistent background hum of financial worry didn't disappear. It found new material, a new threshold, a different uncertainty to attach to. Because the worry was never about the money. It was an internal condition being given a financial address. And money cannot resolve an internal condition. It can reduce genuine external risk. It cannot do the other thing. Those are different problems, and confusing them across a decade is an expensive mistake, not financially, but in the life sense. Are you protecting your future or avoiding your present? That question arrives eventually for everyone in this pattern. The only difference is whether you get to ask it while there's still time to let it mean something, or whether the years answer it quietly for you without being asked. Some things to sit with. Not to answer out loud, just to notice what happens inside you as you encounter them. When you imagine spending a meaningful amount on something genuinely within your means, something that would add real depth or quality to your life, what is the first feeling that arrives? Calculation? Or something closer to dread? When your financial picture improves, when a goal gets hit, when the number goes up, how long does the good feeling last? A day? Hours? Or does it shift almost immediately into the question of what comes next? When you imagine your life 5 years from now, is the picture meaningfully different from today? Or does it mostly look like today with the numbers slightly larger and the same things still waiting? Has someone who knows you well, someone who isn't wrong about you, ever suggested you're harder on yourself around money than your situation calls for? Did you explain why they didn't fully understand? Is the thing you're saving for still something you actually want? Or has it become a destination you're committed to out of loyalty to a version of yourself who chose it a long time ago? There may be an honest answer to that. It doesn't require saying it to anyone else.
Here's what becomes possible when you can see this pattern clearly. Not fix it. See it. There is a real difference between a decision made from strategy and a decision made from managed anxiety. The decisions can look identical. They can produce the same outcome on paper. But they come from different places and they produce different experiences of your own life. Someone operating from strategy holds both the accumulation and the eventual use of it in view simultaneously. The saving is in service of something, and that something stays visible. Someone operating from anxiety has lost the thread of what it's for. The saving is in service of the saving. The buffer exists to maintain the feeling the buffer provides, not for funding anything specific. Noticing which one you're in changes the quality of the decisions that follow, not because awareness automatically produces different behavior, but because a choice made with accurate self-knowledge is a different kind of choice, even if the outcome looks the same. Even if you decide to keep saving at exactly the same rate. The difference is that you chose it clearly, rather than being carried forward by a pattern that felt like a choice. That distinction between a life shaped by examined decisions and one shaped by habits that merely feel like decisions turns out to be one of the most significant differences between two lives that look almost identical on paper. Saving money is a genuinely good thing. It creates real options. It reduces real vulnerability. In most circumstances, it is among the more responsible things a person can do. But anything that powerful, anything that produces immediate relief, earns social approval, and looks indistinguishable from virtue, can quietly become a vehicle for something else without ever announcing the shift. You didn't build financial freedom. You built something you don't feel safe using. That won't apply to everyone, but for the people it applies to, it tends to land with some precision. Are you protecting your future or avoiding your present? At some point, you have to notice the numbers changed, but the feeling didn't. Most people never ask that question honestly enough to know the real answer. You might be in a position right now to ask it. If something in this felt specific to you, not general, but specific, sit with that before moving on. Watch the small decisions that come up this week and notice where the feeling lives. If you want to leave what you noticed in the comments, even a single word, that space is there for it.